What's up YouTube, Fred here with another video for Fred's Full Throttle. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I have new videos that come out every single Friday at 1 a.m. I've got a whole bunch of them pre-uploaded, and with the quarantine going on, I'm taking as much opportunity as I can to film, edit, and get things uploaded. So please subscribe, and onto the video. So for today's video, I'm going to cover 5 things I don't like about the C7 Corvette Grand Sport. I love the car overall, but there are a couple things that I don't know what somebody was thinking, and I figured that I would cover them in a video, and hopefully that'll help inform people who are thinking about maybe getting the car, or just give you a bit of a heads up on the type of things that stand out. I've owned the car about 3 years, a little over that actually, and I've got about 11,629 miles on it, so I think it gives me some pretty good perspective. So without further ado, onto the video. The first thing that I'm going to tell you, and this is going to be a bit of a revelation, is that I'm pretty sure that this car is a goldfish. I know that sounds a little weird, but hear me out. I am pretty sure that it all makes sense, at least it does to me. So you set up the car, you get the seats set up the way that you want, you can set them and save them in memory, so you get the perfect driving position, you can put it in different drive modes, you can select all the suspension settings, and it's fantastic. The car remembers and keeps all the settings that you have. For things like the seat, you can switch between some different modes. It'll actually retain multiple different driving positions, so if you have different people driving the car, or if you have like a relaxed cruising mode and then you have like a more upright track mode, that kind of thing. So the car is great in that sense. However, there are 2 things that the car just doesn't seem to remember when you get in it, and I find them to be not so much a huge problem, but more of an annoyance, and I don't understand why that couldn't have been something that they code into a little subroutine in the software so that the car could remember. One is Rev Match. If you had it on or off, the car doesn't care, it's going to turn it off no matter what. And the second thing is if you have heated or cooled seats. If you turn those on, stop the car, get out for 2 minutes, get back in, it won't remember it. Now, it's not a big deal. It's definitely not something that is like, oh man, I can't have the car, it doesn't remember what my butt temperature needed to be. However, my Mini Cooper that I have, Cooper S, it is a older car than this. It's a 2016. I bought it CPO. It was 1/3 the price, and it remembers those settings. You drive, go to a gas station, you stop, you're out for 5-10 minutes, get back in, the car actually remembers. There is some threshold, so it's not going to just indefinitely leave the seats on if you parked it for a month and then drove it, but I feel like it should remember that. And so for the auto rev match, let me show you what I'm talking about. So you'll notice here on the steering wheel, we've got a paddle that says Rev Match, we've got a paddle that says Rev Match. It's kind of funny because I have a manual car, but actually that's what Chevy's decided to use these paddles to do, is to switch in and out of Rev Match mode. So yellow, see the one down here, that tells you what gear you're in. So I can shift different gears and you'll see the gear indicated there. Now, when the letter is yellow, or when the number is yellow, that means that Rev Match is turned on. If I pull one of the handles, you'll see it says Rev Match turned off, and that it goes back to white. Now, every time you start the car, it's going to default to Rev Match off. And so if I turn it on, and we're going to turn off the car for a second, so engine start stop, turn it off here, and then we're going to turn it right back on. It's going to go through its little boot up routine, and I'm still in gear, and you'll notice it's white. Now, it was yellow when I turned it off, and it is now white. And so every time you get in and out of this car, even if it's for a momentary stop at a gas station, unless you leave the car running, it's not going to remember what mode you were in. It's not a huge problem, but it's one of those things that you have to remember to do it. So more than once I've stopped somewhere, ran inside for a second, came back out, started the car, didn't notice, and then start driving, and then the first time I have to downshift, it jerks you around a little bit because you forgot to turn it on. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so now that we're underway, let's talk about the second thing that I'm not a huge fan of for this car. It's the fact that the wheels are known to be a bit fragile. Well, let me explain. So the wheels on this car, I believe they're 19s in the front, 20s in the back, 285 front, 335s in the back. So they're pretty wide, they're high performance wheels. So one of the things that's important to me when I bought the car, as well as why I haven't replaced the wheels, is that they need to stand up to the type of abuse you're going to throw towards the car. If you're riding on a track, if you're driving it anywhere near the limits, and I'm not saying that I can or I'm able to, but if you wanted to, or if, hey, a race car driver was like, hey, let me get in and I'll show you how to drive the car, you want to be sure that the wheels aren't going to be your weak point. The amount of stress and tension that those are under, both maintaining the grip of huge super wide tires as well as handling all the bumps and jostling, the weight of the car, the twist from the acceleration, all of those things combined mean you need a really strong wheel. So I've been hesitating on buying aftermarket wheels for the car. I love how these ones look, but my biggest concern is actually about the safety of the wheels. There isn't, to my knowledge, a standard for wheel safety or strength or some measurement that indicates how strong a wheel is. Now, where this comes to a little bit of a problem is, so that hesitation has maybe been a little bit misguided. I've been on a number of different Corvette sites and forums, and there are a lot of people who have had a C7, a Grand Sport, a normal Stingray, and hit a pothole, hit a bump, something at normal speeds, not doing anything crazy, and dented and or cracked their rims. Now that's a bit of a problem. So that's a bit of a problem. This car is very expensive. It's got a lot of performance potential. People do drive them pretty hard. I certainly use every opportunity I have to take it to a track or to go and do a performance event or a driving school. And I need those wheels to be able to do what they're said to do. Not to mention the fact that to replace a single rim's well over $1,000. I think it's like $1,500 for any of the OEM wheels. Which now makes you think, okay, if I wanted to go and drive this and let's say I dented a rim, do you go and replace one? Okay, $1,500. Did the tire get damaged? I mean, these are low profile tires. And then, okay, if it's damaged and I'm buying just one, do I want to have three, kind of used wheels and one brand new, or do I buy a full set, or do I buy aftermarket? All of it is a little bit stressful for me. It's not a huge deal. I do drive very carefully. I scan the road ahead. All those years of on-road motorcycling since I was 16, so about 20 years, all of that helps me avoid potholes, drive on smooth roads, really pay attention to where I'm going and what I'm driving on. But things that you can't avoid happen. I've been on the highway and been, over in a certain lane, and I've got cars all around me. You're going 60 and you end up, there's a pothole, you can't miss it, and you end up hitting it. And every single time I'm gritting my teeth and I'm worried that I've somehow damaged the wheel. So far, knock on wood, it's been good, but that's one of the things I don't like, because I don't want that in the back of my mind, worrying about a potentially very expensive thing that you have no control really over if it happens. You can be careful, but that's a bit of a problem. All right, so on to the third thing that I don't like about the car. That beautiful long hood, that slunked out, as I said in my last video, look, where it's hunkered down and it's just got these beautiful proportions, very similar to like an old Jaguar or something, or even a classic front engine Ferrari. That beautiful long hood also makes it a real pain to park. If you're pulling forwards into anything, I am super worried about hitting something. So the car does have front cameras, which make it a lot easier. There's two, one on either side of the license plate, and they sort of watch the sides, as well as there's a composite view where the two cameras they're very wide angle, and they let you see what's in front. Now that's great, and you can switch to a back view, a front view, it's pretty good. The problem is that it doesn't really indicate how far you are from things. So I've gotten out of the car after using the camera and been 1 millimeter from hitting something. I've also had something where the lighting wasn't very good. I pulled up actually to a McDonald's. I stopped. I felt something, so I backed up a little bit, and sure enough, I'd actually hit the curb. Now, the plus side is that the bottom splitter on my car is injection molded plastic, so it's flexible, it's bendy, and there was no damage done to the car other than just the littlest of a scuff, and you can't really tell from more than 2 inches away. If I had a carbon splitter, that would have been like $1,000 mistake. Additionally, I was being cautious. I was watching the camera, I was inching forward, and so I'll show you in a second what that looks like and how the camera's, the resolution's not great, but that's a problem. You've got a car that, by its very design, you're not able to see things very well from the front, and it ends up that you're kind of guessing each time you park. So what I've done to mitigate that is I back into spaces. The camera is a lot better for the back for some reason. It's very clear how far you are from things, and I just don't pull in forward. Even pulling into my garage, I'm pulling in forward because I don't have anything real close to the front of the car. My workbench is 3 or 4 feet away, but I actually use the back cameras and a line on the floor to know how far in that I've pulled, because I don't trust the front cameras as well as I would like to. So that's the third thing. So let me show you what I mean. I have put a bag of grass seed in front of the car, and we're gonna use the cameras to figure out where to park. In this long nose of a car, you will see that it is not exactly a science to figure out how to use these cameras. However, it's not the easiest thing. So we're gonna put it in camera mode. Okay, so if you see here, this is the bag. There's 2 cameras on the front, and this is, I think it's a composite view of what's coming down from the front. So put it in gear. We're gonna pull until I think I'm about to hit it. All right, so you can see on the image here, the front of the car, this dark thing, I believe that's the splitter on the front. So now let's go take a look and see how close we are. We've still got some room. Now, this is good because you never want to get too close to something, but what I've found is that sometimes it's very hard to tell, especially if you don't have something obvious like this bag of grass, how close you are to something. So it's a minor nitpick, but it's definitely something that I've found to be a bit of a challenge to get used to. All right, so we've covered a couple things. Let's get on to the fourth one. The fourth thing I am not a big fan of on this car is that there is no great explanation in the owner's manual of the different track modes. And so what I mean is, when you switch this, there's a drive mode selector down here, and you can switch between like touring mode for when you're cruising along. You've got a rain mode that pulls back on the throttle and it ups the traction control. There's a number of different modes and settings there. By and large, they work great for on-road. I've had no problems. However, when you get into the track mode, you then have a whole secondary menu of track settings. So there's track 1, track 2, those are the modes I've used, and there's like 3 or 4 others, and those modes don't have a great explanation in the manual. They have a high level, like, oh, traction control is reduced a little bit, and stability control remains on, stability control is reduced, traction control is reduced further, that kind of thing. The way that I was able to figure out how this all works is twofold. One, I went on a forum, CorvetteForum.com, and I dug through to find, has anybody else run into this? Like, why isn't this a big deal? And it turns out a lot of people wanted a better explanation. And so they actually quoted a couple different things from Taj, one of the lead designers for the car, as well as they found some internal Chevrolet documentation that explains how the track modes work, what they do, why you would use one or the other, and I found that to be super helpful. The second way that I learned was actually at a track event, and I played around with the modes, and what I found was there was a fairly big difference, for example, between track 1 and track 2. So track 1 is a fairly heavy-handed approach towards track driving. The traction control will step in pretty much if it detects any wheel spin. The stability control is on all the way as far as I'm aware, and really it felt like you could pretty much go ham-fisted, slam on the gas, slam on the brakes, and the car is going to sort it out for you. Now that's great, that's super confidence inspiring, and when you're learning a track, it actually is pretty handy, because then you don't have to worry quite as much about the car stepping out or breaking loose a little bit. So the problem with that is when you're at a performance event, so for example, the track driving school that I did at Lime Rock Park, you actually generally know the layout of the track. And after a couple hours, especially as you've been lapping and lapping, you know what you're doing, you know what you're trying to do, and that holds you back. So then I switched it into track 2, which by all accounts is a relaxed version. It lets you have a little bit more control of the car. So that gives you a little bit more freedom with the car. You can induce a slide if you want. You can do a little bit of drifting, which it also just, when you're hammering on the throttle, you then are in charge of, okay, I feel like the wheels are slipping a little bit, but it's not stepping in quite yet, which is good. And it lets you have a little bit more freedom. I wish there was a better explanation for a car that is as track focused as the Grand Sport. I feel like that's something that it should have been included. There certainly is a description, but I didn't find it gave a good enough explanation beyond some vague terminology around what is actually changing with the car. Thankfully, the Corvette forum, as well as a little bit of trial and error, helped. I went back afterwards and I made notes to myself on what are the differences between the modes, and how did that affect my driving, so that I know, okay, if I'm on a track and I'm new, here's what I want to use. If I'm on a track and I'm feeling comfortable, here's what I want to use. Now, I didn't even touch a couple of the higher modes where it starts turning things all the way off. I'm not quite at the point where I feel comfortable doing that, even with nothing around and no barriers to run into or other cars. So take that for what you will. It's just something to keep in mind, especially if you're going to do some track driving. You want to do a little bit of homework on what those modes are. Certainly, sport mode is not good on the track at all. You'll find every time that you get hard on the power and you're going through a corner, the car is immediately going to cut throttle, and you really can't go that fast. So for a situation where you want to go fast and you want to have handling at the same time, you can't use sport mode. That's what the track modes are for. All right, so the final and fifth thing that I wanted to cover is the vagueness of the gears between, I would say, from 5 into 6 and 6 into 7, and then back down through. This is a 7-speed manual car. There is an automatic option. You can get that. I believe it's an 8-speed, and that doesn't suffer from this problem. But with the manual, you're rowing your own gears, and so as you're shifting along, there's a lot of notches to go in and out. And one thing that I wish is that they were a bit more well-defined for the 2 overdrive gears, 6 and 7. They're very tall gears. I mean, at 75 on the highway, flow of traffic, 7th gear is idling. You're at like 1,200 or 1,500 RPM. You can actually get 30 to 35 miles a gallon, depending on what drive mode you're in and if you're really babying it, that kind of thing. So it's those gears are great for highway travel. However, shifting in and out of them is weird, and in fact, 7th gear specifically almost feels like you're just sort of like squeezing a marshmallow as you go over into that gear. It's not very well defined, and that's definitely a bit of a challenge. So essentially, if you're shifting and not making a conscious effort to put it in 6th, put it in 7th, you're gonna miss shift. At least for a while, I still do it. So I've owned the car 3 years, 12,000 miles, and I'm still messing it up when I go into 6th or 7th. And especially on the downshifts, I'm gonna go from 6th into 5th. No, I ended up in 3rd, and now you sound like a lunatic revving really high on the highway. It catches you off guard, and so I've just had to train myself, focus on the shift, firm positive action, and it works. But even with the amount of kind of break-in and, the car has definitely now got a couple years under its belt, those things should be a little bit more well-defined, and it still feels a little mushy going into 7th. And the split between the gates on the gears is very hard to tell by feel. So just something to keep in mind. So anyway, those are the 5 things that I don't like about this car. That said, this is still the best car I've ever owned, and hands down one of the very best cars I've ever driven or ridden in, full stop. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you guys have a great day, and remember, I have videos that come out every week on Fridays, so please subscribe and enjoy. Have a nice day. Fred out.